I have limitless potential. I have all I need inside me. I have opportunity. I have all the strength I need to succeed. I have all the strength I need. I am grateful for all I have. I am grateful for my life. I am grateful for my health. I am grateful for my desire. I am grateful I was born with fighting spirit. I am grateful for my strength. I will use my strength every day. I will use my spirit every day. I will give my all every day. I am determined. I am willing to sacrifice. I am willing to go the extra mile. I will go the extra mile. I will do whatever it takes. There is nothing I cannot have. No one I can't become. I have no limits. I will achieve whatever I set out to achieve. I will achieve my goal. I see my goal clearly. I know when I will achieve my goal. I know how to get there. I will achieve my goal. I will be great. I have set the date. I will not be late. I will be great. I have limitless potential. I have all I need inside me. I have opportunity. I have all the strength I need to succeed. I have all the strength I need. I have limitless potential. I have all I need inside me. I have opportunity. I have all the strength I need to succeed. I have all the strength I need. I have limitless potential. I have all I need inside me. I have opportunity. I have all the strength I need to succeed. I have all the strength I need. I am determined. I am willing to sacrifice. I am willing to go the extra mile. I will go the extra mile. I will do whatever it takes. There is nothing I cannot have. No one I can't become. I have no limits. I will achieve whatever I set out to achieve. I will achieve my goal. I will do whatever it takes. I will do whatever it takes. I will be great. I have set the date. I will not be late. I will be great. I am a winner. I am a fighter. I am a beast. I am a machine. Success is mine. There is no doubt. It is mine. I can. I will. I will.
All right, on that note, once again, I welcome you guys all. And today, we'll be moving ahead. We'll be going further in what we started last session. And let me just do a little recap of what we treated last class. We mentioned that bearing is like a clockwise angular distance between two distant locations. And we said that bearings can be represented either by three-figure bearing or by compass bearing. So we did an illustration on that. Then we also further went ahead to look at sine rule, which states that in a right angle triangle ABC, small letter a over sine capital letter A is equal to small letter b over sine capital letter B, which is equal to small letter c over sine capital letter C. And we stated that the conditions under which we can use sine rule. Then we went ahead, we also looked at cosine rule. And we said cosine rule is small letter a squared is equal to small letter b squared plus small letter c squared minus 2bc cos capital letter A. Then we gave the other variants, and then I also stated the conditions for which we can use cosine rule. So today I want us to go straight into solving solving examples. So if you just have any question, just type it in the chat box. Type any question you have in the chat box. I will attend to it. So today I want us to look at some examples. I will do one, we will do some together. Then I will give you guys some to do as classwork. As we are in the class, you will do it for me, and so that I can gauge your understanding of the subject matter. Now let's look at this. The question says that given that y is 20 kilometers on a bearing of 300 degrees from x, given that y is 20 kilometers on a bearing of 300 degrees from x, how far south of y is x? Now, before I continue, I want you guys to keep in mind the steps that we discussed when we were looking at solving elevation and depression. It is exactly the same step. The same steps apply to them. And then I said the first thing we need to do is to draw the diagram. We have a picture of what is happening. So once you are able to get the diagram correctly, then solving the problem will not be an issue to you. So we said we'll draw the diagram. So as I said last week, let me change my screen so that I can show you guys the working. We will work it together. Let me copy the question. All right. So I hope you guys can see my screen. So we have the question here. Given that y is 20 kilometers on a bearing of 300 degrees from x, how far south of y is x? So as I said, the first thing we do is to draw our cardinal points. So we draw our cardinal points like that. Then we represent our north. And you will recall that I stated specifically that bearing, you always start from the north. You measure from the north. So that's the north. That's our north pole. So they said y is 20 kilometers on a bearing of 300 degrees from x. Now, another thing I want you guys to note, where are you starting from? If you look at the statement, the question will tell you from. So wherever you see from, that is your starting point. So in this question now, our starting point is x, because the question says from x. So this will be our point x. So we are starting from point x. This is our x. So they said y is 20 kilometers on a bearing of 300 degrees. So we'll measure 300 degrees starting from the north. And if you recall my discussion last class, I said if you move from north to east, 90, another 90 from east to south, south to west, 90. So if we move from here to here, we have only moved 270 degrees. But where we are going to is 300 degrees. So that means we will add 30 degrees to this to make it 300 degrees. So we continue this and probably stop somewhere here and represent that as our 300 degrees. So we draw a line. We draw a line like that so that this point will now be our point y. And the distance between x and y, we were told, is 20 kilometers. So you put your 20 kilometers there. This is our point x. So this, from the x to y, the angular difference is, the bearing is 300 degrees. So you also write 300 degrees. I can't put superscript. So let's just leave it like that. So that's 300 degrees from x degrees. So the question now says, how far south of y is x? Now, the next thing we will do for this kind of question, we will draw another cardinal point at y. We will draw another cardinal point at y. So the question asks us from how far south of y. This is south of y. This distance is the south of y. They said how far is the south of y is x. Now, in this kind of question, what you do is you will extend, the first thing you do, you will extend this line, this cardinal point of, this is x, then you will extend the south of y. This is y. We are going south. So this is south of y. We just go south, directly south. Now, this distance, you know, this is from y to, let's call this place now. Let's now assume this place is our point z. Let's assume that is z. Now, the distance we are required to find is the distance between the south of y and x. This is from here to here. This line represents south of x. But the distance we are asked to find is the perpendicular distance between y and x, which is this line. So between y and this line x. So the distance we are required to find from this question is line YZ. The distance we are required to find is line y, is distance between y and z, because z is at the south of y. This is our y. This is the south. So where the cardinal point of x meets the cardinal point of y, of the south of y, that's the distance we are finding. So we are finding the distance between y and z. Now, if we look at this triangle now, when we were treating trigonometry, when we were treating sine and cosine rule, we mentioned something that for you to use any of the two, you need either two sides or one angle. If you are using sine rule, you will need two sides and a non-included angle. If you are using cosine rule, you will need two sides and an included angle. So from this diagram now, what are the angles that we know? What are the angles that we can determine? Now, if we come to x, if we come to the position of x, now we know that moving from x, from the north of x to this point, moving from the north of x to this point, to this point, to this point. So if we move from here to here, that's 270 degrees. Then for us to get to 300, we subtract 270 from 300. So that means we have additional, so this angle here will be 300 minus 270, which will give us 30 degrees. So that is angle 30 degrees. Now, so that means we know one side, we know one angle. Now let's come to this point Z. Because this line coming from X and this line coming from Y, they are perpendicular. They are perpendicular to each other. So this triangle, this angle is 90 degrees. Is a right angle. Because the two lines are perpendicular. The line coming from X and the line coming from Y, they meet at right angle. So that means this angle too, this angle will be our 90 degrees. So that means in this case now, we have two angles and we have a side. If we go back to our set of rules, either sine rule or cosine rule, which one will be applicable in this case? If we go back, we will see that it is sine rule that will enable us get the distance. Let's call this distance. Let's call this small distance. Let's call it small letter x. Let's call it small letter x. So we know two angles and one side, and we want to find another side. So that means the rule that will be applicable in this case is the sine rule. The rule that will be applicable in this case will be the sine rule. So what does the sine rule say? The sine rule says that small letter a divided by sine capital letter A is equal to small letter b divided by sine capital letter B is equal to small letter c divided by sine capital letter C. Now, in this case, in every case, you will only need two pair. You will only need, there are three items here. A over sine A, B over sine B, C over sine C. But you will always need two of them, depending on which one you have. So if we want to denote the sides and angles of this triangle now, we can say that this side, because it is facing angle Z, we can decide to call this side small letter z. We can decide to call this side small letter y, and we call this side small letter x. So wherever you see, you can now interchange either A for x or B for y or whatever. So if we go ahead, if we rewrite this equation now, we will have small letter y x divided by sine capital letter X is equal to small letter y divided by sine capital letter Y is equal to small letter z divided by sine capital letter Z. Now, if we put in the figures we know, what we are looking for is small letter x. So we will retain x. So we have small letter x divided by, what is the angle facing x? That's 30 degrees. That's sine 30 degrees will be equal to, what is our small letter y? We don't know it. We write small letter y divided by, what is the angle of y? We don't also know that. Sine capital letter Y then is equal to small letter z. We know that to be 20 kilometers. So we write our 20 divided by sine of angle z. Angle z is 90. So sine 90 degrees. So that we will have x. So the two that we will combine together now will be this and this, because we know both the numerator and denominator here, and for the one we are looking for, we know the denominator, so we can easily use those two, so that our equation becomes x over sine 30 will be equal to 20 over sine 90. So we can see that we have just one unknown in this equation now. So we have x divided by, what is sine 30? Sine 30 if you check, 30 is a special angle. So sine 30 is 0.5, which is half. So we have x over 0.5 is equal to 20 divided by sine 90. 90 is also a special angle. Sine 90 degrees is equal to 1. So that we will have, if we cross multiply, x will go and multiply 1, 20 will go and multiply 0.5. So that we will have our x will now be equal to 0.5 multiplied by 20. So 0.5 times 20 will give us 10. So thus, you will now come and say, you will now come and say, because the question asks you how far south of y is x. So you will now say that x is 10 kilometers south of y. I hope that makes sense to us. If you have any question, can I take that question now? Okay. Okay. Shemilore is raising up his hand. Sorry, is anybody? There's nobody. Okay, do we have any question? Everybody's unmuted. Does anybody have any question? Hello?
No, sir.
Okay, so we can continue.
Yeah.
So I want to assume that we all got this.
Yes.
So, all right. So we can continue. Now, the second question, I will want us to look at the second question, and I want you guys to solve the second question for me. So let's look at the second question. The second question says, the bearing of a point P from another point Q is 310. If PQ is 300 kilometers, how far west of Q is P? I want us to solve that one. So we have 5 minutes. We have 5 minutes to solve that. So let's all solve it. Just follow the same step we used for the last one to solve it. Let's all solve it. So as I said, you pick your point and you are starting from where you see from. The question says from Q. So that means we are starting from point Q. From point Q, you measure your 310 degrees. You measure your 310 degrees to get your point P. Then from there, he said we are going west of Q. You know, the other time it was south of Y. So west of Q. It's just the same, it's almost the same thing. It's just like changing the figures and just twisting the cardinal points, but the questions are exactly the same. So if you are done, please raise up your hands. If you are done, raise up your hands. Is anybody done? Okay, a favor is done. Okay. So favor, what's your answer? Favor. Hello. Oluwabi, you are done?
Yes, sir.
What's your answer?
153 kilometers.
153 kilometers. Do we have anybody who also got that? Do we have any other person who is done, who has finished? Favor, you raised up your hands earlier. Right? I will quickly let us quickly do together. Our time is run. Okay, P is raising up. P, are you raising up your hand? Okay. So let's quickly do it together. So the question says, from point Q, point P is 310 degrees away. So the first thing is, you start with your cardinal point. You draw your cardinal points. This is our north. So we are moving 310 degrees. So we'll move from here to here is 270. So that means we move 40 degrees more for us to get to 310. So we just move a little more. And we have our point. We have our point P. So our point P will be here. Then the question now says that, what is the distance? How far is P from the west of Q? The same way, in the same vein, you will draw the cardinal points. You will extend the cardinal points. Draw your cardinal point at P. So this time around, you are going west of, this is the west of Q. This is your Q. That's your point Q. So we are going west of Q. This is west of Q. So we just extend our cardinal point. We extend it to west of Q. Then we also extend this downwards so that we also have a right angle also. So in the same vein, so the distance we want to find, if we call this one, for instance, we call this one R. So the distance they ask us to find is from the west of, this is the west of Q. How far is P? This distance from P to the west of Q, which is PR. So what are the sites we know? We know this to be 200 kilometers. Now to find this angle, we need to find this angle. This angle now will be 270. We subtract 270 from 310 so that we will have 40 degrees. So this place will be 40 degrees and this place will be 90 degrees, as we all know. So this is, let's call this one small letter q. So we want to find small letter q. So if we get all what we have small letter q over sine q. Small letter q over sine q is equal to, we know small letter r over sine r. Please don't mind my writing. Our small letter q, we don't know, so that we have small letter q over, we know q, our angle q is 40, sine 40 is equal to, we know our small letter r to be 200 over sine 90. So we know, we'll just use our calculator to find sine 40. We know sine 90 to be 1. So we cross multiply and we get our q. So does that make sense to everybody? Does any one of us have any question? Does anybody have any question? Everybody is unmuted. Do we have any question? Does anybody have any question?
No, sir.
Or do we all understand? That means we all understand it. Because next class we are going to move a little further.
Yes.
Okay, what I will do, I will give us one assignment. I will give us an assignment to solve, and from there I will be able to get feedback as to how far we have understood this. All right, once again, I thank you guys for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day. So after the class, immediately after the class, I will send the assignment to the WhatsApp. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, sir.